What's up, nerds? This is Mimi, still being allowed to operate a mic for the No-Till Market Garden podcast. I'm very thrilled to be still allowed here. It's about to get a little weird because I'm not really sure how to say the key word of the podcast today. So there seems to be a bit of a civil war about this word, this nut. And I'll just put it up against another word, which is pretty big here in the Northwest. Salmon. Salmon. How do you say the word salmon? You say salmon, right? Okay, you don't say salmon. And yet we say almond. And it appears as though in California, this is a very divisive matter. North versus South, almond versus almond. I don't know how it's all going to play out, but we have an expert to help us sort it out. Her name is Benina Montez, and she is a badass fourth-generation farmer in the Central Valley of California near Merced. And Benina has been farming along with her parents and her husband, Herberto. And they have actually made the shift to regenerative organic certification for their almonds and olives. And they also grow pre-productive walnuts, and they run organic pastured chickens for eggs. Benina and her husband also run a flock of sheep in their orchards to help with the regenerative techniques. And I think it's really cool to talk to somebody who has had the journey that Benina has had, because it's not just about the transition from, something conventional to something regenerative, but also just what it means to be a fourth generation farmer and how you do have to kind of continuously move the bar on what you're doing if you want to remain a relevant family farm. So I really wanted to talk to Benina because she's just super awesome and honest, but also, I think she has a lot to offer people who are curious about how this can be done. It's always baffled my mind how challenging it is to find organic no-till nuts when tree systems, silvopasture seems like one of the most sort of low-hanging fruits, if you will, in transitioning farms to better practices. And I'm very excited to share this interview with you with Benina Montez from Burroughs Family Orchards in the Central Valley of California.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden podcast is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, tools, and information to help ensure their growing success and help feed their communities and families. The research farm is at the heart of Johnny's, where they trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Their breeding program uniquely focuses on introducing varieties that meet the needs or solve the challenges mixed market, small farmers, and avid gardeners face. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorites to grow this season. You can also browse their online growers library, link in the description, for a wealth of free educational resources. The employee owners at Johnny's look forward to growing with you. Today's episode is also brought to you by RIMOL Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. RIMOL Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimolgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a RIMOL tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. All right, back to the show.
Well, Benina, thank you for joining me today. It's a real pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for reaching out. I'm happy to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to start by giving people kind of a sense of where you are in the world. So can you tell us where you farm, how many acres, and what you grow?
So we are located in Central California, between Sacramento and Fresno, and between like San Francisco and Yosemite. So we live in Merced County, and our mailing address is Denair. Our telephone, well, pre-cell phones was Waterford, but we went to Atwater High School. We kind of are out here in the middle of nowhere in the rolling hills. And we're farming about 1,200 acres, and primarily that is almonds, but we also have some walnuts and then a small block of olives.
Amazing. And this is your family's operation, and you're several generations in, is that correct?
Yeah. My great-grandfather had started a milk delivery business and ended up buying a dairy in the East Bay east of San Francisco. And they had that dairy going for a while. But in the early 70s, my grandfather wanted to look at other options. So they found this property and bought some other property, that made the ranch what it is today. And then my father, after college, came back and kept developing it. And now I live here with my kids, who are fifth generation.
That's amazing. And what happened to the dairy?
Well, we moved it down here. I say we, I mean, the people before me, the family before me, moved it down in 1978, and it was about 1,050 cows. Just a regular conventional dairy. They milked that. I think in 1997, they went ahead and expanded to a little under 1,500 cows. And so it's still here. I can see it. I can hear it. It's still on the same property. And my grandfather had gone through a split with his brother in the business. And then my grandpa and my dad and uncle were the main ones that were part of this operation. But they did have 3 other siblings that were also in the business. So because of how they had to, change business by splitting and doing all that, my parents didn't want our generation to have to do that. So in 2003, my dad and my uncle split. And then as my generation came in, my parents went ahead and partnered with us so that we would each have our own enterprises. Although we still work together on, like my company has the main shop. And so we purchase the fuel for everybody, people,
Gotcha.
Doctors work down there and stuff like that. So the main dairy is still in existence and it's still going, but my cousin runs it.
Gotcha. It's one of the many challenges of a multi-generational family farm is how those things transition over time. And it sounds like you guys have managed to do it fairly amicably, at least, and keeping the enterprise not just growing but thriving.
Well, I mean, we're surviving right now. It's California has lots of rules and regulations, and I mean, they all sound good, but, implementing them can be a challenge and can be costly. And, in general, farmers are independent and also very able to adapt to change. And if you just look at the history, farmers have had to continually adapt and change and make it work. So I feel like we're still there, but I feel like the farmers today, this is where I'm at. I'm in it right now. I feel like we've just got stuff coming at us in every direction.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can get into some of that because you have a very unique operation. Your family was the first regenerative organic almond orchard. Is that correct? In the world?
Yeah. To be certified. Yeah.
To be certified.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what led you down that path. I know that when you came back to the farm, you took things in a new direction. And I think your orchards probably look a lot different than some of the other almond orchards in California, at least that I've seen. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that journey and sort of how you've come to be where you are now?
Yeah, let me go back just a little bit. So we had the main dairy going when I was growing up. I'd worked summers helping with that, feeding calves or feeding cows. My dad did the beef cattle and the crops and the almonds. So I ended up helping him more with the beef cattle growing up. But we had those different enterprises all under the same business. So if dairy was bad, hopefully almonds were good. If almonds were bad, dairy was good. You had that diversification to try and spread your risk out. And so when we went through the split, my dad, we had open ground, and my sister ended up developing her own dairy on part of the property, but I just had almonds. And I was like, well, how can we diversify? Well, if you just have almonds, what can you do to diversify? So we talked about doing organic. At the time, my dad wasn't so sure about that. There's things that you do, and that's how you do them because that's how they're done. And meanwhile, that was in like 2003, 2004. My younger brother was exploring the option of starting his own dairy based on the success that my sister had had. She had gone down to New Zealand, spent 3 months down there, kind of learned that style with the grazing. And so her dairy was running along. It started in 2000, I believe. And so it was a seasonal grass-based dairy, but not organic. And so my brother was going on ground that it was just native ground. Nothing had been done with it. And at the time, organic was growing. And they made the decision to keep it organic and so make the dairy be organic. So, they had to go do a 180 and figure out their new toolbox. And so as that was gaining success, as they were learning more knowledge and we were visually seeing the changes, my dad was more open and we also found somebody that was a consultant for us that we felt comfortable with and trusted. And we thought, okay, let's start with the first block. So we did that in March of 2006. And by early August, I was ready to put the next block in. And so we just, kind of slowly started going through and watching and learning and transitioning. The biggest change happened in 2010 because I was married in 2009. And by 2010, I was expecting and was telling my dad at that time. So we had a split operation at organic and conventional. And I just was telling him, I can't be the one on the permit. And, if they come to an inspection, that means I'm the one that has to be out there mixing tanks and doing stuff. And I don't want to be out here because I'm pregnant, I just don't want anything to happen. And so then he said, okay, well, what about Raul, who is our ranch foreman? I said, yeah, no, I really don't want anybody to have to be around this stuff. And then we talked about all the rest of our team. And I said, I really don't want to have any of this stuff on our farm anymore. I'm pretty much done. And he was in agreement, and so we said, okay, we're done. Put everything into transition and we'll figure it out. I'm just that person. I get that from my parents. So I appreciate my parents. And, I'm sure I have a lot of things I could complain about, but I appreciate that my parents have encouraged all of us to learn stuff.
It makes such a huge difference, I think, for the older generation to make space for the new generation to not just make some decisions, but to really kind of drive the philosophy forward, if you will. And it sounds like you've had a pretty good relationship with your parents in terms of, how you've wanted to move things forward, and it really being sort of at first, at least, a health-based decision. And I love that you are also motivated by the health of your staff and your crew. So talk a little bit about that transition and, when you started the grazing program and how that sort of shifted over time, because I think, an organic orchard is one thing and comes with its own new skill set that you have to learn and all kinds of challenges and barriers. But then you also decided to go regenerative. And I don't know if you called it that at first. I certainly didn't have that word when I first started farming that way. So, what was your journey like to, where you are now with the grazing in the orchard and all the other things that you've introduced?
So by 2015, the whole farm was certified organic. And that was really exciting because I'm kind of derailing, but a lot of organic doesn't necessarily tend to be at scale. And so, like, I remember one farmer telling me, I have a rule. I don't speak with farmers that are over 100 acres. And I was like, what do you want me to do? Like, I'm trying to affect change. I'm trying to do good. Like, what's your deal? Anywho, and so kind of in that whole time of the, having the dairies and then obviously seeing all this volunteer vegetation come up in the orchards as grass farmers, which is what the dairies were, working on soil health and making sure their pastures are good for the cows. We're seeing acres and acres of this beautiful, lush green grass coming up in the orchards and going, what, this just seems like such a good resource. And, on one hand, it's such a positive, but in the world of almonds, like, it's a real negative, right? Because you have to deal with it.
I totally know what you mean.
So my dad was like, let's, can we run yearling heifers out there? We put up electric fence to try and do that sometimes. And that was okay. And we tried to put chickens out at times. Our coops that we have are old cotton trailers. So they're pretty tall and our orchard spacing doesn't really allow for them to go in there on mature orchards. So we would kind of go around the orchard on the outside. But they do fit in for young trees because they're, the size of the tree isn't there yet. So we're able to rotate through on our young stuff. And then, we just kept evolving. And my brother up in Oregon was telling us about some sheep that were coming up for sale because one of the farmers up there had lost his water and had some health issues, I think. And so he was saying, I'm gonna mention it to the, another guy down here. And I was like, wait. No. Don't mention it to him. Hang on a minute. My brother's dairy was closing down. So that shut down 12/31/2000. And so I was like, well, my dad needs something to do. And there's 2 members of the team over there. Why don't I'm saying yes to this. Let's do this. Let's get these 750 ewes and, let's figure out how to work it here on the trees. This will give you guys something to do and this will be great. And the truck came February 4th and, or February 5th, I guess. And one ewe had lambs, she had twins. And then they didn't stop lambing, for the next 4 weeks or whatever. I thought we had plenty of time. They were March lambers, but they lambed the whole month of February. And so it was just like, and the second day my dad said, you know what? Your mom's dealing with health stuff and I am not going to be able to do this project. And so I was telling my husband, well, I guess we're on it. We're going to have to figure this out. And I loved the fact that I had never done animals after college because, weekends are free, trees, it's easy, you just turn you just turn the pump on. It's not all the time. And so our lives have definitely changed, my immediate family, because you're on call now with having animals. But I do love them. 2 weeks after we got them, I have my third daughter who was 6 at the time was like, I want to be a sheep farmer when I grow up. It was 2 weeks after getting into it. So it's been really cool just learning and having my kids be a part of it because they're not so big, they love to help catch lambs when we're going to vaccinate and, they're great. So that happened. They came and And then we were just running with it. It's not all, definitely not, it's not perfect. We're totally learning. And the first year, I don't know that it would be exactly chalked up as a disaster. I guess I would just say it was a really big learning curve, and we were able to do it. We didn't have the pressure of having to have it all figured out at once, So we had different people on the team, and we all learned a lot. I really had to help. I myself have learned a lot, and just how to be a better communicator and manager. So yeah, it's been cool.
It's a lot. I mean, I try to relate to people just what it means to add an animal enterprise to your cropping system, because there is that that added layer of accountability, having to be there for living animals, but also just the getting the system right and actually having it be a benefit and not a drag on what you're really trying to produce. Can you talk a little bit about that? For
sure. So these ewes were all pregnant coming in. So we had no say in when they were going to have their babies or anything. So the first, 250 were in that March time. And then the next 500 were in May, which was probably fine for Oregon and the weather up there. But for down here, it was not good. We also, this flock was very prolific. So we had a lot of what they say twin lamb disease from multiple babies. And it's not necessarily bad, but I want to make it work for our operation. So now what we're doing is we're lambing once a year. We're lambing in October. And the reason that is important for us is, well, temperatures wouldn't be so hot. And yes, we have winter, but it's not like snow winter like South Dakota, right? So we're okay. Last year we had a small flock of, 125 ewes that lambed in October. And so we didn't get, from that original 250-ish, we didn't get all of them bred, but the ones that did breed, like twins, we had singles and twins. We had a handful of triplets, whereas before we had triplets and quads, and that just ends up being more work. And so, we only had to really just make sure they were rotated through the pastures, which were, of course, at prime quality of feed, so that these lambs, as they're nursing and then coming off of not needing to nurse so much, have perfect feed. My nutritionist was like, you're gaining half a pound a day. I have stuff on the feedlot, that are barely doing that. So what I'm hoping is that this is going to be a win-win all the way around. So we're actually going to lamb in 2 weeks. We're going to lamb. We got about 400. And so, yeah, that's where we're at right now.
That's amazing. And it sounds like it's really, you have figured it out in a relatively short amount of time. You're harvesting the lambs, and then is that a side business, or is that managed by somebody else? Are you just continuing to grow your flock? What does that system look like? So
last year we really didn't keep anything. We didn't keep replacement ewes, and I'm just happy we had stuff to send off to make weight and stuff. So that I'm saying that from the February and May lambing. The October ones did great, and we saved all the ewe lambs. And the wethers, we're not keeping anything intact. All the wethers made weight, and we just basically, I'm going to say maybe 10% we're trying to do value added. We're in a couple local butcher shops and a couple restaurants that can use it, and some word of mouth and website a little bit. So most everything is just going to be sold on the market right now. That's something that I want to work on, is me add some extra value. I mean, it definitely is a business, and it definitely has value. Number one, we don't have to use machinery for 6 months of the year to mow and spend, labor and fuel and, wear and tear on everything. So that right there is a really nice side benefit, but then also the income from, obviously amazing products, but, cool use as well. I myself was not really a lamb fan. I mean, we grew up with it, once or twice a year, all the time. But man, I don't know if it's because they're hair sheep and not wool sheep, and, because they are only like, probably around 6 months old, but they are amazing. So
I would love to just get you to talk a little bit more about that, because I think one of the challenges when you do add an animal system is kind of not having a plan for, if you're going to do value added. I don't think people really appreciate what it means to market a whole new product, an animal product on top of that. And so it sounds like you've taken a little bit of a kind of a wading in approach, which I think is really smart, because I think if you try to bring in another very high value add enterprise to your system without growing staff to be able to really take that on, you'd run out of bandwidth immediately.
Yeah. I mean, I wish there was like 10 of me. I love all of this, and I want to be able to share all of our nutrient dense, delicious products that are good for the planet and good for you with everyone. But yeah, that takes a whole nother level. It's one thing to be able to produce it and have that get in the right packaging and make sure that it is delivered appropriately and take care of customer service and all of those things. So yeah, I mean, we're starting small, and I'm hoping that we can just grow. I have lambs ready now, but the lamb market is really shot right now. So I'm just trying to be patient. And my dad is very encouraging on what is the plan? What is the plan? And I am more of a, we'll figure it out. Relax. So I think somewhere in between the two is probably your safer bet. But I am definitely very proud of the products that we're putting out with this lamb.
There's no better testament to a product than the fact that the person who's growing it says it's delicious and loves it and eats it too. So I'm sure your family benefits a lot from having that added enterprise on the farm. Can you talk a little bit about what changes you've seen just from the health of the farm since adding that animal layer, and how that's maybe changed, soil health or anything else that you're monitoring? And then also, I would love to hear about, actually, I'll ask that as a separate question, because I think that's enough of a question in and of itself.
So we've been doing research with the Ecdysis Foundation, and just in a generality on regenerative over conventional, way higher numbers of vertebrates, water penetration, water holding capacity, the amount of insects and birds are just way higher in general. We're seeing, some species that we haven't seen before, and it's exciting. This year we're cutting back on water usage on our trees. I don't know. There's just the standard, I guess, procedures that come out from the UC and from the research that's done, and then it just becomes kind of mainstream on this is how you do it. But we got to figure out other ways to work on this, and farming regeneratively just makes sense all the way around for a conventional farmer or an organic farmer. It makes sense mentally and financially, dollars and cents. So one of our goals is to share that with more people. If we can get, the Central Valley, which is like such a huge breadbasket, it's just amazing. The variety and the quantity of fruits and vegetables that come out of this area is so incredible. I don't think, people really understand what magic is here and what a priority it needs to be for our politicians. It's pretty mind-boggling. But, at the same time, well, if we kept all the soil covered here, what could we do? Could we help actually impact our whole climate here? Would we actually get more rainfall if we kept the soil protected? And I am really jazzed. My parents were the ones that initially talked about regenerative, and I was like, oh my goodness, here they go again. Here's the next thing that they want us to do. Okay. But then we had these researchers that were coming in and sharing the knowledge, and like, oh, wow, we are doing some pretty cool stuff. How could we make it better? And so now I want to go to these workshops and talk to people, and whereas before I wasn't so into it. So I'm hoping so we're hosting the second regenerative almond workshop in February. Last year we had over 300 people come. I didn't even think 100 people would come. They said prepare for 200, and I thought that's nuts. And then the registrations kept coming in, and it was like, wow, this is amazing. So there is interest out there. It's just figuring out how to get people to adopt it.
That's really incredible. And I am so with you about all of the, the co-benefits, the financial benefits and all of that. But I think, from a farming perspective, just everything that you point to in terms of the entrenched sort of current best management practices and overcoming the way that that's become accepted as sort of the best you can do. Meanwhile, that whole entire state is running out of water. And if you're using less water, you have to be getting a lot of attention for that. And not only, just for what you've been able to put out into the world in terms of your products and your education, but also visibly, I think it makes a statement what you're doing, because it does look so different and it looks so much nicer. People will link to your website, of course, but people have to appreciate this idea of what if we got this right? How much better could the future look than what we currently see outside our windows right now when we're driving? And I would love for you to talk about that, because I think about your children and how fortunate they are to see this model of farming. Because I know when I was growing up, the model of farming was my parents thought they were doing the right thing, and all of my peers, their parents thought they were doing the right thing too. Meanwhile, things were just kind of getting worse. And so talk a little bit about what that's meant for you and your family and what it can mean to just visibly be so different and so much more healthy looking. It just looks so nice. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I feel like farmers in general for sure want to take care of the resources, like nobody's out there like, hey, how can we degrade our soils, and how can we put a herbicide that is systemic that goes into all parts of the plant? Like, how can we do that and not? I don't think any farmer has that mentality, but I do think that the information coming out from the majority of the researchers is funded by companies that are going to make a profit, and so it's like, how do we break that system without breaking ourselves, I guess. So I think that's one major part, is the information that's being fed to farmers, and GMOs and herbicides and pesticides, that's not going to save us. We've done it for 50 years. Show me how that has saved the planet. It hasn't at all. So going on to a positive note in your question, you asked about the differences. And just this spring, we had some visitors from the UK, and they drove from Bakersfield north. And when they got here, they just kept saying, it is so green here. It's just so green. We've been on other farms. We've been touring. I feel like I'm back in the UK. Like, why your farm is just so green. What is going on? Anyway, and they had been on plenty of other places. So I was like, well, that's really exciting to me. It is just, night and day difference. You drive down the road and you see these pieces of wood sticking out of the dirt and the whole soil just looks dead. That's how I would say it. Yeah, they got some green leaves on the trees, but the soil it's not vibrant. It's not thriving. It's just there. And you come out and you see insects flying around and you see, you just see more wildlife, and it's like just alive, and you can feel that energy when you're out there in the orchard. So yeah, way big difference. I mean, there's some pictures that got taken last year, and my kids are in the cover crop and they're bouncing around and looking at ladybugs and eating grass with my dad and, tasting it and feeling it. And I'm not worried about it. I'm not thinking, gosh, what's going in them, or what are they inhaling, or what are they eating? I'm not worried about any of that here. So yeah, it's a way big difference.
Yeah. And if anything, they're probably really benefiting both mentally and physically from just the health of the environment that they're in. And hopefully as they get older, they can start to appreciate what that's going to mean for them going forward. And they can be a part of sharing these practices with the world. And along those lines, would you talk a little bit about, your peers in the sort of orchard community, and have, when you do these workshops and things, are they largely orchardists who come? Are they consumers? Is it a mix of both? I mean, are other almond farmers coming to you and saying, gosh, I'd really like my farm to look like this, but I really just don't know where to get started? Or do people kind of look at you like,
there must be some
kind of witchcraft going on?
Well, this was our first big event that we had done, trying to open it up and share. And it had a variety of people. It had farmers, it had people that just were interested, that are just consumers. We had a lot of researchers, and it was a pretty varied gamut of people that attended. I would say that I don't know that we have people just banging on our door saying, hey, we want to farm like you. Definitely for us, the financial aspect has to play a role, because we can have the loftiest goals on trying to save the planet, but if you can't pencil it, like, it doesn't matter what your goals are, because you're not going to stay in business, you're not going to have your farm. So we definitely recognize that as a major component. And when we did our projections too, I made it sound like it was just willy-nilly. I said, bam, we're done with chemicals and went organic. But we did our homework, and we made some spreadsheets and looked at it over the course of the time. And basically what we found was that we could stay alive. We could keep our place going and do it and have some reserves and make it work, but that we would have made more money had we stayed conventional. But that just wasn't in our wheelhouse. And so I think that people, are just really concerned with keeping their farms going, and that it costs so much more to farm a different way. And right now, I feel like I'm in the middle, right? Because we've been going organic now. This is our 7th year that the whole farm's organic. Now, as I learn more about regen, I am super excited about lowering our cost, lessening our inputs, and increasing our returns. And so that's just like the next step. And so we're still kind of in the middle of that transition, even though we're doing everything that it says, for being regenerative. And I fully identify as a regenerative farmer now. We still have to just manipulate those little things with making sure that everything's in balance to really dial that in and make that magic happen. We're still sequestering carbon. We're still keeping our soil covered and doing all that. But, I want to do more. I want to do better. So
I think it's really important that you mention that, because it isn't just a switch that you get to flip overnight. And there are definitely, or at least for me, and I think for others as well, there are points at which you kind of have to do a little one step backwards to make two steps forward. Yeah. And, those can be really challenging moments where you think, boy, if I was conventional, I would just hit this with a hammer.
Yeah.
and you have to get past those moments. And I also I also identify as a regenerative farmer, but I'm uncomfortable with the term because I think that for me, at least, it's just an endpoint I'll never reach, that there's always going to be something that we can do to make it better.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is with the Ecdysis Foundation, and do you know who that is? Are you familiar with him? With John?
Yes, I am, but you should talk about that a little bit, because I don't know that everybody will have heard of them.
So Dr. John Lundgren is a researcher, and he has the 1,000 Farm Initiative right now, and he is really trying to put actual numbers together that validate this type of farming compared to conventional. And it's exciting. It's amazing. They were doing almonds here. They're doing wine grapes. They're doing apples in Washington. They're doing wheat. They're hitting a variety of industries in various states across the country. I think they even have some spots up in Canada. And so they're just validating this way of farming, which is super exciting. And what I was going to say was, through that and through the other farmers that are kind of involved, now we have some more dialogue. One of our direct neighbors that we share a fence line with, he was part of an original study that was part of a grad school program. And he couldn't believe the numbers that were coming back. And so there's no way, I've sprayed, like, navel orange worm was a problem a few years ago. And it's like, I sprayed multiple times. I'm not getting those numbers that, the regen farm is getting. What is going on? And so, they have farms that are converting to organic now. And so that word of mouth and being open, but, I feel like it takes maybe a personal issue, or something has to happen to a member of your family or something before you're like, hey, this needs to change, whether it's getting diagnosed with cancer or some kind of autoimmune or something like that. I feel like your eyes don't get opened, or you don't go down, I would guess you could say, the rabbit hole until something like that happens. And then you're like, all right, oh, there is another way. Oh, that other way is awesome. How do I do that more?
Yeah. And I think for some farmers, it can even happen where they, the member of their family that gets sick first is their farm. And they start to really see it. I mean, I think to some degree, just like you say, I've always said this, anybody who's working the land probably is there because they love it. And so that sort of slow decline that is visible across so much of American farmland, I think it pains farmers, but they have to keep it inside because they're trying to run a family, and it's very difficult to think that you're doing things maybe in a way that could be done better. So I think that it is a space that you do need to have your eyes open, and whatever that line is for people, it's wonderful to have an example nearby that's, like you, without judgment, just open and saying, hey, there is another way. And if you're curious, and we're happy to share.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden Podcast is brought to you by Tilth Soil. This Cleveland, Ohio-based company is producing some of the highest quality potting mixes out there. One of the biggest lessons I learned in farming is the importance of good seed starting mixes, and that's why I included Tilth Soil in my book and have been using their seed starting mix, Sprout, on my farm since 2020. Tilth Soil produces potting mixes approved for use in organic operations like our own. Their living soil is made with fully composted food waste they collect and process themselves. Whether you need a cubic yard super sack once a year or ongoing deliveries for your year-round operation, Tilth has you covered. The team at Tilth can help with shipping, coordination, and provide ongoing support throughout the growing season. To learn more, visit www.tilthsoil.com. That's tilthsoil.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Certified Naturally Grown. At the heart of sustainable ag is the belief that soil health and thriving ecosystems grow the very best food. Certified Naturally Grown is a grassroots certification program that recognizes direct market farmers using holistic methods and shows your customers that the products you bring to market are grown to the highest ecological standards. If you're looking for an affordable certification option that focuses on the thriving of local farms and foodways, you're going to want to check out CNG. Their peer-to-peer inspections create opportunities for farmers to connect, exchange knowledge, and build regional support between growers. Certify your produce, flowers, livestock, apiary, aquaponics, or mushroom operation today. Find out more at cngfarming.org. That's cngfarming.org. All right, enjoy the show.
It's great that you've been working with John Lundgren. And has that, when you got started with them, did they help you overcome some of the barriers that, that would have been really difficult without some help? Can you talk about that at all?
So when we started, an email came in from a grad student, and it was like, hey, I'm trying to work on this project. And I, like I alluded to earlier, I'm like, So I sent to my parents and said, hey, can you handle this? And it sounded interesting, but can you handle the coordination and everything? And so, but then after that initial study, I knew they were coming out, or I knew he was coming out and collecting data. I think it was 3 years. And then at the end of that, I was pretty excited to see the research that came out of that. I was pleased. So I think it was like 6 times basically the water that was coming in would infiltrate 6 times faster, right? So way less runoff, which goes back to that soil organic matter and bigger water holding capacity. And, we're getting pretty few and far between water events. So we need to be able to maximize that as much as possible. Everybody talks about 1% increase is 20,000 gallons. Well, you start chalking that up to thousands and tens of thousands of acres. Well, we can do a lot with that. So basically for us, I think it was just nice to have some validity, and this is what we're doing. But now it's like, wow, we do have, I don't know, remember the number, 3 times more, living and breathing insects and bugs and et cetera, out here on our farm. So that was probably the biggest thing from working with them, just all of the validation for what we've been doing for a while. You had asked previously too about all the changes, and we definitely see increases like in our soil organic matter and stuff like that. I want to do more testing than what we've been doing, just to verify it even more and across the board. So that's something that we're working towards as well.
That's awesome. And have you, just from a practicality standpoint, one major curiosity I wanted to discuss with you here is that, the type of nut farming that I'm most familiar with is hazelnuts, and, filberts, I guess some people call them. And that believe me, I've tried. I've never seen an orchard around here that has any grass growing on the ground. A little bit of that is happening around here, I think, in orchard establishment, where they'll actually harvest a rye crop while the trees are getting going, but not necessarily in the interest of growing organic matter, but maybe even just to get some more income while their trees are coming online. But one of the defenses that they constantly throw at me when I ask questions about why is this not just bare ground, but like you're scraping it. I mean, you're scraping off the topsoil to be able to harvest these nuts. And I understand harvesting is a major endeavor and very, very labor intensive if you were doing it by hand. So talk about harvest. I'm so curious to hear how that would be different for you than, say, a conventional orchard.
Yeah, standard operating procedure is bare floors, and then you shake the almonds. They lay out 7 to 10 days to dry, and then they are swept into a windrow, then picked up by the harvester, carted to the elevator, and put into the trailer. And that's just pretty standard practice across the board. So we've fought a lot and worked really hard to try and have, this really nice product. But, we've had to use a lot of mowing, a lot of not necessarily a lot of flaming, but flaming along the strips. And then, making extra passes with the sweeper, running it through a conditioner before we pick it up. It's just a lot. And so this year we had a Tanias harvester, which is one operator, and it has it's just one machine, but to connect it, it has a piece that goes up and over the tree. So that's a limiting factor for us because we have established orchards that are already bigger. I would say for anyone that has younger trees that are getting going, like it's awesome. And it shakes and then it just continually moves. And they even said that they have it set so that it will be on automation. Like you don't even have to have a person actually driving it. I saw videos of that. Just really amazing, which, I feel like ag is going more and more that way. And then it just windrows into 2 rows on either side of the tree. So what I envision in my mind is just going down the middle of the orchard and just mowing, 5 or maybe like 6 feet wide, and using a catch frame system, which is what the pistachios and the prune industries already do. They, though, have them go into a bin and then, they take them off. The almond industry, as of yet, is not set up like the walnut industry to dry. So walnuts, they still go on the floor, but then they're taken in and they're dried. Almonds are not. That's not a normal procedure unless for some reason they get really wet or rained on or it's late season, and then it's costly to pay for all of that. So I'd rather use the free sun's energy to dry them out. But again, I don't want to have 100% of the orchard floor be bare and empty. I'd like to just go down the middle and mow and keep that as the place. So we are looking at, there's different ones out there. There's different companies that are doing the pistachio and the prunes, but I want to modify that to be able to still catch frame, but put that into a windrow. So I kind of want to use the best of both worlds for our new harvesting. That's the direction that I want to move to. The hazelnuts, do they actually shake them or do they just naturally fall as?
Yeah, they just fall.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just shift, and so that's probably why they are that way, but I don't know why they couldn't get into a timed shake so that they could get rid of that. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I've also always wondered about, just it's so valuable when you have, a very skilled machinist in your back pocket, somebody who can look at a system or look at a problem and say, if we just converted this vacuum or this whatever and could just figure it out. And then that becomes the next thing to really move these things forward. And I'm sure you're going to figure that out. And with the olives, because I've been to Italy and I've seen how they harvest olives, which is very, it's super old school. And, it goes onto these big sheets and stuff. And are you doing it that way too? Or are you doing it the same way as the almonds, or how does that work? Or are they not old enough yet?
Yeah, no. So we have we have both ways, I guess. I planted a hedgerow around some of the fields, thinking that it was going to be fine and we would be able to mechanically harvest it, but there's not enough space. So all of that is still hand harvested into like the buckets and or with tarps. And then the other stuff is like it's just a mechanical harvester, kind of like the grape setup, but it's for olives. And so all of that is able to be machine harvested.
And one question I meant to ask you, and again, this is going to sound very ignorant to anybody who is already an almond farmer, but are your trees standard? Are they own rooted? Are they on some kind of rootstock? Is that a technology that would help keep a smaller frame tree, or is it a better system if it's on its own roots? I just don't even know.
This is a good question because the dry farmed almonds come up, So right now, all of our stuff is on a peach type rootstock, and then it's grafted onto an almond. But that is something that I've been talking about as well. Could we switch to something like that? Would it be more resilient? Would we be able to use less water, et cetera, et cetera? One of the reasons why the industry is how it is because of the bitter almond. So if you don't want to end up with something like that where you have an inferior product. But I think there has to be a way to merge the two, and come out with something that is good.
Might be something to pop in your hedgerow, just to experiment with. What do you feel like are the main, for other orchard owners or people who maybe are part of your peer group, what do you feel like are the biggest barriers to them adopting these practices? Is it actual infrastructure and the cost of transitioning, or is it more about just the mindset and really sort of the fear that we have of making a great change?
I think fear definitely plays into it, and it's just like unknown, right? There are lots of grants for hedgerows and for cover crops, which is great, but the research that was done many moons ago says during frost, you want your soil as bare as possible. So those two things don't merge, right? Like, how are you going to raise a cover crop and let it get big enough so that it has flowers for all the pollinators when they're telling you don't have it, those two, how does that work? I always am wondering about that. And then here it's very hard because the systems right now, the irrigation systems are set up to conserve water, use, just do irrigate to ET to whatever your plant needs. And that's it, and so flood irrigation and solid set irrigation, that all got a bad rap because you weren't using your water correctly, but those did have benefits, to recharging the groundwater and, all the side benefits. And on solid set, you definitely have a better chance of helping during the frost events, which this year, we were down even in the 22s degrees, and, it's hard to protect a crop when it gets that cold. So, there's just a lot of components to it, but I am encouraged because we did have that event, and I have, friends and neighbors that are farmers. And so I gently am asking about, what about cover crops? What about, just to start the conversation. And I'm encouraged because like one neighbor, 15 minutes down the road, he has come up with a good cover crop that doesn't get tall, that comes right back when you put water on. It dries out when you don't, when it's not watering. And so he's all about it, and we're brainstorming on ways to be able to make that a side project so that now you got even that income coming in and you're still keeping your soil covered. And you still have stuff for pollinators. But anyway, I don't know that everybody's following what we consider like the 5 principles to regenerative farming. But even for me, the biggest thing is getting the soil covered at least half of the year. would be an incredible positive change.
I have this, it's like a mantra for me now. We don't have to go to Z right now. Like, I think that's the biggest fear that people have, is that we're saying we have to flip this whole pancake over overnight. And it stops them from realizing if 50% of American farmland would just be covered 50% more of the time, think of the benefits of what that would mean.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
You're totally right. I mean, I think the cover cropping question is another one I actually wanted to get into with you. Have you experimented at all with different blends and trying to, figure out the frost question? Because I think, I get that a lot too as a viticulturist, having permanent cover. We've had some frost events, and of course everybody tells me that my cover crop is going to blow me up with frost and kill my vintage. And yet I've observed that with the right cover crop blend that becomes active at a particular time, biological activity has its own thermal mass and can actually be a buffer. So have you observed that as well? And have you experimented with any of that?
So I don't have specific knowledge on all of our blends or any of that. Historically, what we do is for the first 3 years, we will plant a cover crop. And depending on if the field has been like fallowed, that's a different blend. Like, we have pictures of a major mustard deal that was like way taller than my dad, who's 6'2". Like, we have pictures of that. And then, but then it's like a little bit different with the nice blend for when we're doing the young trees, or if we want to harvest it for feed for the cattle or whatever. So there has been some different blends that way. Once the orchard is pretty much established, we just let the native, or not, I don't mean to say native, the volunteer vegetation just come. Now, that is where I have really seen some changes where you would say it would be like more weedy. It starts turning into more grasses. And not that there's anything per se bad about the weeds, but it obviously looks beautiful when there's just a nice stand of green, lush grass. The sheep, for the most part, will eat any of it. So that's a benefit. They don't really like the nettle. And we do have some areas that have hemlock, which is poisonous for them. Other than that, they're rocking it. But that is something that I wanted to look into. And so we're contemplating this fall planting some of what will be grazed into a cover crop, and then maybe doing some that's just going to be grazed right off the bat. So that's the other thing I'm trying to weigh out is, do we do cover crops or do we focus on the grazing? Because it takes time to get that cover crop established, and I have a limited window. And so, we're still dialing it in on how big of a flock we need, how many acres we have to cover, and what, if any, cover crops should we specifically plant for them. But we will always keep them going in the young trees. I don't know if that answers your question exactly.
It does. I mean, I think you have a very experimental attitude, which is great, because it will, it always helps to, advance the system if you are willing to experiment and have things not go right.
I would have to say one of the big reasons why we have been able to do this is that open-mindedness, hey, can we try that? And Nick and Raul, our manager and foreman, they have really embraced. Raul's been here for 30 plus years and has been fantastic. That if I question or ask, hey, can we try that? He most of the time he doesn't just tell me no. Where I think a lot of people would be like, nah, I don't think that's a good idea. That's going to take too much time or energy or whatever. And he has been so amazing and open-minded to be open to try things. So that has really been a blessing here.
It makes all the difference in the world. The team that works with you, especially if they've been around, if you're a generational farm and, you're the next generation coming in, and, maybe some of your staff or most of your staff have been there at least for another generation. Yeah. Oftentimes that is, it's either the reason you move forward or the reason you continue to move backwards, because that can be a big influence for sure.
This is a very fun story. So Raul is one of 13 children. He is the 9th boy. He's the youngest son. So his oldest brother and my dad kind of developed this place. And then Raul and I are kind of the ones that took it to organic and then to regenerative. So it's really a fun connection.
That's a really amazing multi-family story. That really sets you apart, I think, and is going to be a tremendous strength going forward. It means everything. So, I mean, this is a loaded question, but if you could go back to, yourself, just as you were kind of coming into your career on the family farm, what would be the main things that you wish you could tell yourself at that stage?
That is a good question. I wish that we had definitely taken advantage of a lot of the programs that are out there to change systems to help you during the transitional times. We converted a lot of irrigation. We just paid out of pocket for it. It was the right thing to do for us, and we just did it. Whereas I know a lot of farms, they're writing grants and doing that. I mean, definitely, I wish I had started earlier, on doing some of this stuff, but you don't know what you don't know. And so it's hard, but, yeah, I mean, I guess when I was coming in, I was focused on learning Spanish and, learning our systems here, but I guess that was important to know what we had and then, make some changes. So, just really protecting our resources sooner. And the biggest thing now that I'm thinking about it is having numbers to compare. I wish we had done a lot more testing as we went through everything. That's probably the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, a data set. I used to say that all the time. I would give my kingdom for just the historical data here, family. Thanks for not collecting it. Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah.
And in terms of, talking to other almond farmers, olive farmers out there, what would be the main message that you would share to sort of help make a space that brings people in, or, what would be the message that you would want them to hear the most?
Well, there is definitely another way, and we don't have to be reliant on all of the outside products. I mean, I'm not saying by any means to go buy a flock of sheep and figure it out on the fly. Like, the only reason that worked was because we had animal background. We had extra irrigated pasture that we're able to, that worked for us. But I know that that's not going to work for everybody. I guess, just being open-minded and it's hard because, like I alluded to earlier, just the information that's being fed on how to do it we have to have we need some variety. We need some other opinions. We need the John Lundgrens that are, putting the information out there, and we need to be able to disseminate that information quickly and to everyone in those specific industries so that they can see that. Otherwise, it's just the same large corporations of the world putting their information out on why their product is going to save us.
I'd also love for you to speak a little bit about some of those very California specific hurdles that you have to overcome just in getting your product to market. Do you want to speak to that at all, and also talk a little bit about the ways that your product make it to market and how critical it has been to have a direct outlet, or bringing people to the farm? How much of that has been sort of critical to your journey to have this value added thing that you're putting out there? Did you have to develop one outlet first? Was retail kind of placeholder, and then you did the direct, or did you do one first or both at the same time?
So when we started, on the almonds, that's all we had at the time. We were going to 3 different handlers, and they were selling our products for us under their label. And the reason we had 3 was my dad, was like, don't put all your eggs in one basket, spread the risk. So we went to 3 different people. And we kept that kind of strategy as we were going through. And as the organic came off, came in, then we found somebody that could handle that. And then my husband and I started a organic pastured hen business. So my sister had it before, and she went to like one local store and a CSA. And so that was fine. But when we took it on, we wanted to really make it be its own business. And so we needed to find our markets. And so those markets were going to mainly independent grocery retailers, primarily in the Bay Area and some in Sacramento and Fresno, because that was the market. The Central Valley is not necessarily an organic regenerative market. I mean, there are people that do want our products, but it's not the norm. So as we grew that, and we had a refrigerated truck, and we were making trips to the area, I thought, why don't we add more to the truck? Like, we're doing these almonds. Why don't we do some value added? And so it just kept growing a little bit at a time. We would add a new product. But that is definitely not the main bread and butter of our operation. But now we are selling all of our almonds under our own label of Burroughs Family Farms, but they're still mainly in bulk, in truckloads, pallets, etc. That's still the main outlet for our products.
Gotcha. And do you sell to, I assume value-added food processors who are making, regenerative organic things with your almond butter as part of it, or something like that?
So we have not done, we have like a small offshoot of our own products that say regeneratively farmed on them. We have different flavors, and you can pronounce all of our ingredients. It's all legit good stuff. And the flavor profile of our almond butter is really good. We use a specific variety. And that's the only thing in it is just roasted almonds, and so our co-packer, who we're partners with, they're doing a great job. And then the ingredients, we're not taking kind of like chipped and scratched or junk stuff and then grinding it and making it into an almond butter. We're picking like a good product that is just ready to go. And so I think that is kind of why our stuff is a little better. We are available online, and it's not a huge component. And then, so all the rest of the stuff, it's basically an ingredient for all of the different customers, whether it's going into a chocolate or going into granola or going into a bar, or even some people just, sell them as bulk themselves to different retailers. So we definitely appreciate the ones that share our story and help differentiate why this product is a good product to purchase and who they're supporting.
Yeah, I would. So this is one of the things that I'm always so curious about, because almonds are a commodity, and you were the first in the world with this certification. And so if you're selling to a processor and, maybe to an end product that is a combined, with multiple ingredients, of which you are one, is that certification bringing anything, given that you are part of a market that, you're pretty much the only one out there right now? And does that drive your pricing?
So that's a good question right now. I mean, there have been people that have talked about wanting certain certified regenerative products. It's still fairly new. I mean, we got this in June, and we're just harvesting this year's crop. So there really hasn't been that outlet yet. And so hopefully that will come, because almonds are getting a bad rap for using so much water and being kind of more of a negative in the realm of farming, whereas they could be almost a solution if we just dialed it, a different direction a little bit here in the Valley. So, but right now, nope, we haven't seen a premium or seen a huge, nobody's knocking on the door yet saying those regenerative almonds, where are they? Which, we only got a percentage of our farm certified to see how it was going. I mean, it hasn't changed how we farm. It doesn't change how we're doing business by any means by having the certification, but we'll see what the future holds, and maybe it'll be up to us to get it out there so people can use it. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, one more thing you'll have to do first. No, I think it's really great because it does take. I mean, everything takes one person out there holding a torch in front, and it's lonely, but it's also a really great place to be. And the Regenerative Organic Alliance, I think, has a lot of strength in terms of the connection to the wider marketplace, and how I think that will help a lot to drive demand and just helping make you visible for the work that you're doing. So I hope that helps, because it is an added thing that you have to do to go through the process of certification, I know. And
for sure,
even though it doesn't change how you do what you do, you still have to go through the process. I'm
really excited. I mean, we heard Rick Clark and John Kemp, and you listen to them, and it gets you excited about farming, and incorporating these things. And so I'm excited. The conversation comes up about, well, are you going to get a premium for getting this certification or for farming this way? And I mean, I think that's how all of us would originally think. But I love that they point back and say the premium is your reduced costs. That's going to be your premium, is that you're going to be you're going to increase productivity. You're going to increase the nutrient density of your product, and you're going to do it with less money. That right there to me is my main goal, like that we're in balance with nature, and it's harmony. And, I also like to just point out that the premium, the biggest premium that I see is the benefit to my family and the quality of life that my children will have, which is, it's hard to put a price on that, right? Mm-hmm. I just was thinking, back to the harvesting, which I know it was a long time ago, but the other side benefit to these other harvesters is your product isn't rolled around in the dirt as much. It's caught and laid down, it's dried, it's picked up, and so we're not running sweepers everywhere. I know an issue, especially in the Valley, is all of the dust that's everywhere. And this just, alleviates it takes all that stuff away. And so that's really exciting to me as a side benefit as well.
Yeah. And I think, as you were pointing to earlier, with any type of, agroforestry, silvopasture situation, like what you are building there, the potential benefit to the watersheds, as we can scale those operations, it does become a net positive back to not just your local climate resilience, but your watershed health in general. And so I think, there will be, very tangible environmental and economic co-benefits that maybe aren't specific to you, but to your community as well. And I think that should not be underestimated or overlooked in any way. And I hope that you get recognized for that, because it's a lot of acres that are under your care, and so you really are making a difference, a big one.
I'm excited that we're able to do this at scale, and it's not just it's not, I mean, it's exciting. I hope that we can get more people to follow the direction.
Yeah, me too. And when you look at your kids, do you see any signs that any of them are potential future Beninas?
I'm trying to the entrepreneurial spirit. So my daughter had a little rabbit business and she wanted her own flock of chickens. She wants her own flock of sheep. She's open for that. My son, we have some pigs, so that's kind of his project. My third daughter, like I said, she wants to be a sheep farmer. We'll see what ends up with that. But I mean, of course, they all love the baby animals and collecting eggs out in the pasture and doing all that. So I have no pressure for them to come back to this. But if they want to, I definitely want to make room for them. I want to make that be a possibility. But
yeah,
we all have our different directions, and I'm seeing it as they're growing. They have their own learning styles, they have their own personalities, and I definitely don't want it to be anything forced. I want them to, because they got to find what they love and then do it, and then and then that's not a negative. So
then it's not work.
Yeah.
And do you think? I'm terrified of this question when people ask me, so feel free to just ignore it. But do you and your family do a lot of talking about succession planning for that next generation? I mean, you're so many generations in now. I just think it gets more challenging the further you get.
I mean, my parents have done a lot of the succession planning, and I mean, we have a trust, but we have not done much at all. My oldest is only 11. And so, I mean, I am almost 44. So it's going to be coming, it's going to be something that we're going to be starting to work on, but we haven't really yet. My parents just basically got done doing all of their, and that was 10 or 15 years of meetings and efforts and all the things, So it'll definitely be something that my husband and I will start working on.
Yeah, it never stops. You just get one generation sorted out, and then the next one needs to be sorted out. So yeah, it's great. Well, Benina, I so appreciate your time today, and I would love to give you an opportunity to just have the last word. If there's anything else that you definitely wanted to share with people, we will absolutely link to your website, and any other links that you want us to link to, we'll definitely put that up. But if there's something else that you wanted to talk about, feel free to put it out there.
I just appreciate your time and having me on and letting us share our story. I think the more farmer-to-farmer interaction that we can have, where we can share our experiences, our struggles, but also our wins, will help spread this movement more and more. It's definitely not going to be done easily by regulation, but if we can do it with incentives and word of mouth, I think we'll be much more successful. We definitely need to share this with politicians and just other farmers, and hopefully we can keep this movement going on. Kiss the Ground, Regenerate America, Ecdiocese, lots of good ways to share the information. So I appreciate it.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And I will just say as a parting token that the products are standouts. I mean, I pretty much had given up on almonds because of all the issues with almond farming, and was so thrilled to be recommended your products by a good friend, and I'll never go back. It really is a totally different experience. So I encourage everybody to buy your products and look for you and your work going forward. And we will definitely continue to share that with people.
Thank you.
Okay, baby. So you heard it here, straight from Benina's mouth. I believe almond is how she's going to pronounce it. And since she's the most badass almond farmer I know, I'm going to follow her lead. Although I'm going to just point out that she is in the Central Valley. So she may be trying to play, Switzerland on that. I'm not sure. We didn't get into it, but isn't she awesome? I had such a good time talking with Benina, and I think it's really cool, the stuff that they're doing with education on farm, and hopefully some of you can get down there and check that out. I also just thought that this would be a good moment to do a shout out to Benina's kids, who are adorable if you look at their website. So cute. Anyway, shout out here to Mariana, 11, Ward, who is 9, Juliana, who is 7, and the little Rosie, she's 5. And they're going to be really kick-ass 5th generation farmers, I think. At least a couple of them, or maybe all of them, maybe none of them. Anyway, no judgment here. So thanks for coming along for the ride. Thanks to the no-till growers, market garden people for giving me some space and listening to 10,000 intros that I record and re-record and re-record. It's good times. Anyway, this is Mimi saying goodbye.
Hey, you all, just jumping in here real quick to drop some news and give some big shout outs to our Patreon members at patreon.com/no-till-growers. First, the news. We have brought the beloved No-Till Growers Forum back online in a slightly different format where you can embed videos and post photos and all those good things. You can find the forum and ask me and much of the No-Till Growers team and lots of other great growers questions at no-tillgrowers.com. We will also put the link in the show notes. This forum, like everything we do, is free and open to the public. We do not do paywalls for any of our videos or podcasts. So if you appreciate that and want to support our work, you can always become a patron at patreon.com/no-till-growers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to these amazing folks, many of whom have supported us for a very, very long time now. Thanks you all for that. Anyway, big shout outs to Lori Saliata, Bob Klimick, Chris Platt, Amy Rourke, Chris Devaney, Don Neslon Shiflett Jr., Matthew Dickens, Laurie Britton, Wesley Butterfield, Laura, Joe Hayes, Vijay Rajavan, Kristen Call, Jennifer Rosecrans, Rob Soma, Sean at All About the Garden, Bob, Paul Gagne, Joseph Sanguinetti, Greg Kelly, Bill Altman, Ian at Grindstone Farms, Danny Rodriguez, Alice Savatsky, PTHF, Steve Burr, Stephanie and Alex from Blue Berwyn Farm, Stephen Smith, Ojai Roots, Scott Harris, Silcott, Earthcare Farmer Jane Murner Cynical, Asia Smith, Tony Lopez, Clement, Thomas Eliason, Judson Taylor, Grown Up Farm, Jacob Arthur, Bob and Ann Patton of Hexhamshire Organics, Jared Kirst at Rivendell Farms, Jay Armour, Dan Brisebois, Jay McCombs, Tim Baldwin, Esoterra Culinary, Steve Larson, Fiona and Donnie of Firefly Farm, Jen Lawrence, Mustard Seed Farm, and Zachary Nordland. That was an amazing list, and I probably botched some of those names. Let me know. I will redo them. All right, enough for me.